Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, What the Beck. Today I'm going to show you how to line a crochet bag. You might want to do this for a few different reasons. If you're using a yarn that stretches a lot and you don't want your bag to get super misshapen, you may want to line it. Or if you're like me and anything that's not clothing, you don't want to weave any extra ends than you have to. You can leave your ends on the inside as long as you like knot them and make sure they're secure. So like for example inside of this bag, that's double knotted and then cut, and then I don't want them on the inside of my customer's bag, so I'm going to line it for them, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. For materials, you will need your bag. I personally am not going to be doing crocheted straps anymore, so I'll also show you how to do fabric straps. You'll need your bag, and then you'll need a non-stretch fabric of your choice. You can coordinate it with the bag, you can contrast it with the bag. I'm just going to use one that matches because I have it and I want to use it up. So basically, just to get started, you're going to want to iron your fabric. So let's do that. So make sure you're using the correct settings on your iron for whatever fabric you're using. I'm just using cotton, so this is pretty hardy. It can hold up to a lot. And you're just going to iron out the space you need for the size of your bag, just to get the wrinkles out and make it easier to measure and cut the things you need to measure and cut. Now my fabric is on the fold, so it's not as thin as it looks. It's actually twice as wide as what you can see. Now we have our fabric all ironed. We're just going to let it cool down a little bit, and then we're going to take a marking implement of some sort. Usually a pencil will show up. If it doesn't, you can try a white gel pen or chalk. Okay, and then what you're going to do is just plop your bag down onto the fabric. You can take advantage of the fold if you want, but since my bag is rounded, I'm not going to be doing that this time. And you're basically just going to trace the shape of the bag right along the outside. And you might be thinking, well, technically, isn't the inside of the bag one stitch smaller than the outside? And you would be correct, and I would commend you for being a very intelligent person. However, when we go to sew this, we're going to basically be using some of the space on the inside. So we by tracing the outside of the bag, we make sure it will fit on the inside, but it also like adds the seam allowance for us, so we don't have to worry about doing that ourselves. The one place you do want to add seam allowance yourself is the top. So this opening here, I'm just going to go ahead and draw up about 1 centimeter and then connect that line. And this particular line doesn't have to be super exact, it's just the part we're going to fold over later. So there's our shape on that. We're then going to cut that out on the line. Make sure you cut on the outer line up here. We're going to need 2 pieces, so if your fabric isn't on the fold, then you're going to want to cut the first one out, put it on the fabric again, and cut that again. Now if you need a strap, for me, I like my bags to be shoulder bags because I like them to be like accessible, but I don't want them to be on my back all the time, especially if it's a little bag like this that's just for like your phone, keys. So I'm going to make my strap an ideal length for wearing it on my shoulder. And to do that, I'm going to use my yardstick here for a straight edge, and I'm just going to draw straight up like so. And then I'm not measuring exactly, but I want the strap to be about 2 inches wide so that when I fold it, it's 1 inch wide, but I also need seam allowance. So I'm basically gonna go 1 inch, flip it, yep, see, 2 inches, and then about 1/2 inch this way will give me room for my seam allowance. So I'm just gonna draw that line there, and then I'm gonna cut my pieces out. Okay, so as you can see, we have our 2 pieces for inside the bag, and then we have our strap here, and it's long enough to be the length I want. We're going to just take this over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew around the outside like so. Now, when it comes to the seam allowance on this, you want it to be fairly small, like 1/4 of an inch, I think. Usually people sew with a little more than 1/2 inch of seam allowance, but because we traced this, it's not allowing for as much, I don't know, seam allowance, I guess. But basically we're just gonna sew as normal. Make sure you do a back and forth stitch at the beginning to secure it, and then just go around and do another back and forth at the end. If you have any sharp corners, you can always lift your pedal and pivot. Alright, there's that done. Just go ahead and trim your extra threads. And there's that piece ready to go. Now for our strap, we're basically gonna just fold it in half and sew up along one side. Get my needle up, put that down. You're gonna also want to do a back and forth at the beginning of this just to secure it. Alright. Now my edges are pretty rough, so I'm gonna go ahead and trim them with scissors. My nice ones are over there, so I'm just gonna use the pinking ones. Trim up the rough edges like so. And then we're going to turn the strap inside out. Now, the easiest way that I've found to do this is to push in instead of pull out. So let me demonstrate. A safety pin is a really good tool for this, but basically some people might be inclined to turn it out like this and then pull this, but I find that to be a lot harder to manage. Like, it's just not as easy. So what I suggest is get your safety pin, whoops, take one side of the tube like so, and just go like in and out a few times, close it up, and then tip the safety pin to go inside the tube like that, and then you just push that, and you can kind of like scrunch up the fabric, and then eventually you can start manipulating the fabric that's up here to go over both the safety pin, which is here, and then this part here is now the fabric that's right side out inside of the strap. So we'll just keep doing this and keep pulling the outside until it's right side out. Once our little safety pin is peeking out, it's real easy. Just go like this. Here we go. And then again, we're gonna just fold it shut and hit it with the iron. Remember to remove the safety pin too. All right, and now we're going to go ahead and just sew on this. You can choose to sew straight up the middle, but I find that a bit more complicated, so I usually will just sew 1/4 inch from the edge on both sides. But to do that, I need to change my thread on my machine to the right color, so let's do that. Okay, let's get these lines on here. I would recommend doing the side with the seam first, because that kind of locks it in place, and then the other side will be super easy. Okay, that's one side done. I'm just gonna lift my needle up and do the other side. Okay, here's our finished strap. And now to attach the lining to our bag, we're gonna move back over to the table. So I totally forgot that I needed to put the details on the face before I sew the lining in. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and feel free to watch. Feel free to skip ahead if you don't care about watching me sew these on. So I realized I didn't sew the face on, and I needed to do that before I put the lining in. Originally I was going to put a mouth, but I think it's really cute without it, so I'm going to leave it like that. I might release this as a pattern. I don't know yet. But yeah, very cute. So let's get the lining inside. First of all, we're going to leave the lining right sides in, because when you open it and look inside, your seam will be there instead of this ruffly stuff in the seam allowance. So basically we're just going to put it inside, and since this is a round bag and not a square, I'm going to fold it and then open it back up. Like so. And line up that top bit with the top of your bag, and it's gonna poke out a little bit, remember, because we're gonna fold that down in a little bit. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna grab some pins. I'm gonna pin the liner to the back of this, then I'm gonna turn my bag inside out. The reason we're doing this is because we want to access the bottom of the bag so we can secure our lining down there. So let's see. This is gonna be like that. So I'm just gonna take my needle and thread, and we're going to attach the lining. Where did I put my needle? Here's a needle. We're gonna attach the lining basically to the bottom of the bag. That way it can't be pulled out. Have you ever seen those cursed squishmallows where they basically have an anus and you flip it inside out and there's a different squishmallow? I don't like those. Aside from the ethical problems with the company, I don't like that. So we don't want that to happen to your bag. We don't want the bag to be able to be pulled inside out while being outside in. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Basically, we're gonna tack it down. So we're just gonna take the bottommost area of our seam allowance onto our needle. You can do it on the seam allowance. You can do it a little below the seam allowance, and then we're going to put it through our stitch and just tie it tight. I usually will do a triple knot, just because, you know, I want it to be secured. Just tie that, and then we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Again, don't worry about weaving in your thread ends, because it's it's on the inside that we're about to literally close off forever, so it's totally okay. And also, fun fact, the thread color for this section doesn't matter either because it's on the inside and nobody's gonna see it. So I'm gonna use this leftover yellow from sewing the nose on. And just, again, take that bottommost area of the seam allowance on my needle, and then take a piece of the stitch on my needle and do a triple knot. I also do all this with my thread doubled. I don't sew with single ply thread anymore because, I don't know, I just feel more, it's more secure with two. You don't have to, but you know, I prefer it because since I made fursuits, I know that it stands up to the test of time. Okay, so now that that's secured on the bottom, we see it, we have our 2 points, one here, one here. We're gonna flip it right side out again, like so. And this time you'll see that the lining wants to go with it. That's what we want. Okay. Now we're just gonna realign the upper parts here. And I think I'm gonna change the angle so y'all can see a little bit better what I'm doing. Right, we've attached the bottom bits, and we have this bit poking out of the top. We're gonna take our initial pin out, and we're going to basically flip this top opening down until it matches the top of our bag. See where I'm going here? This is where we're gonna sew down. So we're going to put our pins in all along the outer edge, like so. And then depending where you want your straps to be, you're gonna leave that area open for now. So for me, I'm gonna have my straps on either side, right by the ears. If you want to do like 2 straps that like one they attach at the front and the back, you would leave those open and just pin like this part and the sides. We're basically just getting the lining to sit where it needs to sit before we sew it and before we add the straps. So that's why we need to leave the opening for the straps. Like so. Okay, now we're going to take our straps and we're going to hold our bag open. Wherever the strap is going to be, we're going to stick it in there and then hold the lining to it as well. So you'll have basically a sandwich of lining, strap, and then crochet. And then we're going to pin that in place as well. And feel free to use lots of pins for this one. I'm running out of big-headed pins, so I got my trusty cactus to the rescue. I would recommend putting at least 2 pins where you have your straps just to make sure that they're lined up the way you want and properly. Okay, and then the other thing is, if you're doing one long strap, or like if you're actually any strap really, just make sure that you don't have a twist in it when you attach it so that it lays flat on your body when you're wearing it. So here's another view of this. So like here's our fabric layer, our strap layer, and our crochet layer, like so. And then we'll go ahead and pin that together like so. Okay, and now if you have any other gaps around your bag that you want to just add some more pins to be secure and make sure that it doesn't flip up that lining, you can go ahead and do that. Sometimes I go a little pin crazy with these because I intend to sell them and I want to make sure they look very nice for my customers. I think that's good enough for now. And now we get to do, that corner is kind of popping out, so I'm going to push that down a little more, repin that. So it's all pinned. Now we're going to take our needle and thread and we're going to sew them together. And I usually will do a whip stitch, but you can do a blanket stitch, you can do a back stitch if you want. I wouldn't recommend a running stitch because that's the weakest of the stitches, but you know, it's your life, it's your bag. If you know you're not going to be loading a ton of weight into it, then you know, go for it. I'm not gonna tell you what you are not allowed to do. So let me grab my needle and my thread. And again, for this step, I really recommend you just do a double strand of thread. I can't find my needle. Here it is. I really recommend doing a double strand of thread just because it's stronger, and a bag needs to hold stuff. Doing a triple knot just to be extra double sure. All right. Now, I recommend you start on a non-strap area of the bag. Basically what we're gonna do is pull this open a little bit. You see our seam allowance here. I'm just gonna scoop up some of that seam allowance, not the inside of the bag, but just the seam allowance. And then I go ahead and attach my yarn by putting it in between the layers, or the two strands of my yarn. That's just how I prefer to do it. Then I'm gonna come up through the top of my lining here, and then readjust, tuck my little yarn tails, thread tails in, and then I'm gonna just get going attaching by going through my crochet loop and my fabric. And you don't have to be super consistent with like, oh, I'm gonna put exactly 3 stitches in each crochet stitch. Just make sure it's connected and it's not gonna like pop open. We don't want any like centimeter long gaps, I guess. That would be my recommendation. And then just remove your pins as you go and just go all the way around the bag. Now when you get to your strap, it's going to be a little bit different to sew because we're going through multiple layers at once, like more than 2. So I recommend go through the strap like so, come straight out, and then go back down through the crochet, through the strap, and through the lining. And then we're just gonna go through the strap by itself again, and then back down through the crochet, through the strap, and through the lining. Like so. And you just keep on trucking. You might want to do more stitches in the strap area because that is where the weight is being distributed to, but you know, you can also just do it the same as you've been the rest of the bag. Again, I am not the bag lining police. You do whatever you want. And then once you're past the strap, it's just going to be, again, super simple. Whip stitch. I used to dislike whip stitch, but now I think it's actually pretty applicable and useful for a lot of things. Okay, so what do we do when we're running low on thread? I will usually recommend open up your little pocket between the crochet and the fabric, and then I say just go in there and again scoop up some of your seam allowance. Try not to get your actual lining on the inside, but just scoop up some. Do another stitch right on top of that one, and then you can do an overhand knot, but I basically do it with 2 twists, so I'll do a close-up on this so you can see it. Basically, you hold your thread and needle in a circle, and then you wrap it twice, push the needle through, and then you pull on both the needle and your thread so that it's making a taut loop. Hold that down with your finger or thumbnail, and then that is secure and you can cut that. You can tuck the little tail in between the layers, and then you can keep on going with another piece of thread. But I did reach the end of the sewing, so I'm going to kind of situate my yarn, or well, my thread, right at the top of the lining piece right here. I'm going to do another one of those double overhand knots like that, and then I'm just going to put my needle in between both layers and kind of follow the line, pull it out a few stitches later, and cut. And that is how you hide your final end. Now we have a super cute bag with a lining and a strap, and let's try it on. Okay, so what do we think? Little My Melody bag. Super cute, big enough to fit a phone. And it's nice and finished on the inside. Since we tacked down the bottom, it's not gonna pull out when you take stuff out of it. And overall, super cute. Thank you so much for watching. If this was helpful, please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing if you want to see more creative content from me. I do tutorials, I do crafty vlogs, I do all kind of stuff. So thanks for checking out my channel.